Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show today. On my left, I have Dallas Crane, composer.
Hey, how you doing?
And Steven Stratford.
How's it going, everyone?
And Kyle Uhas.
Hey, guys.
I am Evan Evans. And today, we're going to talk about scoring.
Yes.
Let's talk about scoring.
Let's see what I have in my folio here. Nathaniel P. Winarto asks, do you have any recommendations for a portable monitor speaker that can fit into cabin baggage, so I guess like luggage?
Like carry-on.
Luca Fagnini says, I read that these are great for their price and dimensions. I never tried them, though. He's talking about the ikmultimedia.com, if you want to go to their website. iLoud micro monitors. So, and Will Dawson also concurs that that's a really good one.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So is the idea that you have a portable rig with actual monitors instead of using headphones?
Yeah.
Okay.
But, probably, now that you bring that up, I probably can recommend somebody get themselves the Sony MDR V6 or 7506, the Sony MDR subwoofers, or some AKGs or Bear Dynamics, something like that.
Yeah, probably the Sonys over the AKGs. AKGs are a little tinny.
For sure. I've tested them all. Those ones have lasted about 30 years now, and you can still buy them in the stores. They're the most tried and true, flattest response from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. That'd be the MDR, and then anything that ends with the 6 is probably the correct model. It's a 7506. They have larger drivers and just the flattest response out there. I've even mastered albums with them. Once you get used to them, you can really use them as reference monitors.
Yeah. My understanding, too, is if you're doing a mobile rig, you can't guarantee that you'll be in a quiet, isolated place. So either you're going to be having monitors that you'll have to turn down, or you can't use because somebody else is in the room with you.
Right,
or
along those lines.
You can't hear anything. Or if it's just not quiet enough, maybe it's too noisy wherever you're traveling, then you're going to have to bury yourself next to your monitors anyway. Why not just use headphones and solve both problems? If you're mobile.
Totally. And the thing with, I prefer those MDR 7506s or V6s because they're closed ear headphones. They have these ones called open ear headphones.
Yeah.
I think that's not really going to help you in that kind of situation. Although people use the open ear headphones because they explain that it feels more natural, like they're just listening to speakers in the open air, and so they're able to listen longer. However, I find you get two benefits from the closed ears, at least two benefits. One is it cuts out all that external sound, so you get more accurate, detailed listening. And two, it gets you in that space, in that zone internally, and I find I get less distracted and more focused and more interested in the music work that I'm doing by actually having headphones on. If I'm on a tight deadline, that's one of my little tricks, is to just go into the headphone zone, and I enter my own little world that way. It's an alternate dimension.
Go on.
Oh, I was just going to add, I think they're also semi-opens, at least in the AKG models.
Yeah.
So they leak a little bit, but it's mostly closed.
Yeah, and I haven't explored like all those in-ear headphone options.
Yeah.
They actually have some you can pay thousands for, which supposedly are adapted to the curve. But I'll bet they compensate for that with an EQ like pre-map inside, which, as well, if you don't know, EQ introduces all kinds of phase artifacts into your recordings, and it's not a good, accurate way to monitor sound by sort of EQ compensating the out of whackness so that you can get some flatness from your listening situation. You're just much better off going with a cone that delivers as flat of a response as possible. It's true.
Yeah.
What about the noise cancellation? Is that something that you need to think about?
Well, that could be cool. The only problem there is the noise cancellation usually is ripping out all kinds of like harmonics that are in the music that you're actually hearing, just because there's a little bit of cross contamination between the algorithms, understanding what's the music content blasting in your ear versus what's coming from far away. But with a really sophisticated one, they can probably get that down to between 3 and 1 dB of cross-contamination, But I think, again, you just get yourself the Sony MDR V6 or the 7506, and then you can never have to worry.
Noise canceling, you're actually listening to different audio than, just a regular headphone, because it's an active cancellation. It's listening to what's coming in and then playing the phase inversion of that. over your mix, so you're getting basically two tracks, and so that can have any number of different changes to what you're actually mixing. And I would assume it's better you go to a quieter place or just mix what you can hear.
Did he elaborate? Is it just for mixing or for composing?
For composing, you don't need much.
You really don't want to mix on. I mean, headphones kind of a.
For mixing, for mixing, you wouldn't want to mix on headphones,
That's
except for the fact what I told you, which was that if you are using those, and well, see, I am an ex-mastering engineer. I was a mastering engineer for many, many years, and so I have a lot of experience with kind of like understanding what's going on in my ear, and what's going on in the sound, and how it's affecting your ears, how your ears are affecting what your perception of the sound is, and like that. I'm very aware of like my ear. So, I got myself to the point where with those particular headphones, I knew what they represented true and accurately. Okay. And so I was actually able to mix and master content with those headphones. But I would say that if you are composing, it's less of a big deal. But again, I would go back to that when you get the headphones on, you get into that zone. You get into that focus zone, and that's great for composing, because composing is so laborious creatively, and you want to go internal.
Right, exactly. You kind of want to shut everything off and just kind of focus on that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's true though, exactly what you just said. I mean, if you're a very experienced mixer mastering engineer, you are going to know your equipment. You are going to start to kind of, especially if you have headphones that you use quite a bit. If you are, very, very accustomed to traveling, you are going to start to understand those frequency responses, how those headphones work, where they don't work in certain areas, what to look out for. So really, I guess my only kind of 2 cents in that would be, getting something that it's like you said, that really it's going to have the quality there, but also like you said, that you're going to understand how they work essentially. So.
Yeah. And Christian Fernando Perucci, how you doing, Christian? Says, hey guys, I would go for small Genelecs for that kind of a situation. So if you
very
have
good speakers,
it's
very good speakers.
I mean, if you have the money to blow on it,
that's kind of I think that's pretty much what it is for that.
That would be okay. But I would say that those do have kind of the smaller Genelecs do have kind of a very limited low end. Maybe starting around even like 140 hertz, they start to really roll off. Wow. So you might end up putting a lot of bass into your music, because as composers on the composing end, we tend to love all that bass. If we're not thinking as a mixing engineer or even a mastering engineer, where you put just a touch of bass, almost like salt. As a composer, you want that impactful bass, so you're going to put that in there on those Genelecs, which are rolling off too much because it's rolled off.
Right.
Okay. And so then the actual content of the wave files that you deliver on a bigger speaker system, it's going to be way overcompensated in bass. Okay. So, I think, for the price of those Genelecs, you could get 20 or 30 pairs of Sony MDR V6s and be set for the rest of your life.
That's what it's true. And also, what you mentioned about the bass frequency, that's extremely true. It even goes, say, with headphones, since it's so close. And if you have ones that have maybe a bass boost in there, even if it's a more transparent bass boost, you're still gonna be like, oh, his bass sounds excellent. You sound like a mix, and it's like, hey, where's your bass?
And that's a great way to kind of counterbalance the propensity for you to put extra bass.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
In your music, if you have a bass boost already on your speakers, this is specifically why I use these particular speakers, the MR5 MK3s from M Audio. They have an incredible bass end, and they're very quick and responsive, even when the bass is going, to the point where they don't muddy up the mid-range material, which often, when the speaker's moving, it can cause a lot of mid-range harmonic distortion. And then the tweeter, of course, is separate. But the bass end on these puppies are so outstanding, and so it's just perfect for composing. I wouldn't use these for reference mixing or reference mastering.
Right, no.
But they're excellent for composing, because they get you so into the zone, into the game, into the mood. And, it's like going to hear a THX theater, just full blast, with very little distortion, very clean and pure.
So what is the... I'm trying to deconstruct this question a little bit. What is the reason for a mobile rig? Like, I know people talk about it a lot. We've discussed it, planned about it, but at the end of the day, I'm thinking, if I'm working on a project, I'm going to be working in my studio and planning my life around that. You know, I'm not going to run off to the beach.
Well, you'll see. You'll see soon, Dallas, that part of working on your music is going to be on the airplane to London.
Oh, okay.
And I think that if you can get it down to like a mobile phone and maybe a Bluetooth mouse that connects to it, and some kind of software or something, and you can work on the plane, with little headphones and continue to do work. And if you compose music by hand, that could be really handy. But yeah, there's a lot of last minute travel stuff that goes on once you're doing more than just like the work in your studio. And there's just situations where that might be unavoidable. You might need to cross over just a little bit. You might have some travel time going on somewhere. So I could see how that could be a real thing. Yeah.
I was just thinking, wouldn't it be great in your mobile setup? Because the other thing I don't like about the mobile setup, besides the compromised listening, is you usually have a limited size keyboard, like a 25 key or a 40 key, and that's just creatively distracting.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if they had like an 88 key that was the same size as a 25, just really slender?
Yeah.
Right, because none of us are piano virtuosos. All you need really is just to put the key in without worrying about octaves. But
yeah, well, hopefully at that point you've gotten used to writing everything in notation, and you're just using that as your little like ruler, your architect's ruler for you as a composer, and you're just checking out some voicings. For that I need like a 3-octave keyboard would probably do it.
Yeah.
But even then, be a pain in the ass, and I probably could just get a lot more out of just having no keyboard and just doing it all in notation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I hear you. If you're a person who can't necessarily think or compose in notation terms, and you have to sort of improvise on a device and hear the sound and go through the feedback loop of sort of producing the stuff that you're improvising and that's coming out, then I could see how that could be not the greatest solution to have like a limited little keyboard in front of you. If you do, hopefully it's got a few knobs and sliders, because to get any expression out of MIDI, you got to use the mod wheel, and you got to use the pitch bend and some other things. Maybe they make even like some little units that have breath controller input. You'd be on the airplane, blowing in your part.
Like that'd be great.
Yeah.
But yeah, even just like inputting into like a notation program, I've got to set up my hands on the keypad, putting in the rhythmic values, and then my hand on the keyboard playing the pitch values. And so to not have a keyboard or to have to always switch around, that can get just messy and annoying.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's see. We also have a question from Josh Tackett, who asks, does anybody know what to do on a Cubase expression map for an instrument with more than 16 articulations? Currently, I'm setting all my maps up by loading all individual articulations into Contact on separate MIDI channels. However, the limitation of this is that I max out at 16. Any thoughts on this? And Leo Brennauer recommends to use 2 instrument tracks with a different expression map for each, because there's no option to get more than 16 expression maps per track.
That's really all you can do.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's the limitation of the software.
Yeah. What if you have articulations that you don't need? Do you really need the full 16? Maybe you have your preferred 8 articulations or whatever, and then the second one's got the ones you use less often.
Yeah, primary and secondary.
Yeah, and so you can have one you even hide or you just don't touch, and that track you don't need to worry about it, and then you have the primary one. Because I know, with samples, I've got like the strings, and maybe they go up like an octave and a half with different key switches, but you only use maybe the first 3 or 4 90% of the time, tremolo, staccato, spiccato, and pizzicato. So, how many times do you really use the trills? The trills are always too fast, and maybe the harmonics once in a while.
Yeah.
But
yeah, absolutely. Let's see, and then we have from Turner Horton asks, has anyone here had any issues with composing in Logic Pro X under Mac OS Mojave.
I don't think I have Mojave.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into, but let's say, so Leon Portelance answers no, and William Edmston, nope. Carl Enric Bushman, no. And yet I said probably. One of the things you want to make sure is don't update your system just so you can update your system. Turn off that system software update feature.
Yep.
And it wreaks so much havoc. You're going to have some kind of a conflict. Look, even if Logic Pro doesn't have an issue, some plugin that you're running is.
Right.
And you're going to have to wait 3 years now before that plugin manufacturer puts in that patch or update, whatever. So you might as well just stay 3 or 4 years behind on the solid system that you're running now. Is there something wrong with your system? If there's something wrong with your system, okay, I understand. Maybe you need to fix something. But if there's nothing wrong with your system, don't break what's not broken.
Right. The dark theme isn't worth all the...
Yes. I remember seeing that.
I mean, that's really the only reason people change the Mojave, isn't it? They just want the dark window.
Yeah, please, be a professional. You don't need that. All right.
Yeah, the other week there was some update for this for Serum, and like it messed everything up, and I was going crazy trying to figure out like how to fix it. And then I contacted the guy there who designed it, and I was working with him to fix it. But don't get it upgraded.
It's true. If you're thinking about updating, just do a check. Just check, see like, hey, whatever DAW I'm using or whatever, say plugin, like, is this updated? Kind of list. In most cases, it's easier. If it was just released, then no, that's already your answer. But if it's been maybe a year or so, and you're still kind of like, should I just always just double check. Just Google it. So,
yeah. You don't want to be the first guy to put in the complaint ticket, and then they say, okay, well, let's wait for a few more complaints before we look at that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then suddenly
like
you're the guy eating
years.
it. Yeah.
Like, later, you're like checking the message board every day. Like, all right, no, nothing.
Yeah, let me take a look.
Don't be the first guy to go to Mars. Wait.
Yeah, you want to wait
like
a little bit. Exactly. You know,
before they figure that out.
Did anybody blow up Total Recall style yet? No? Okay.
Yeah, I'm running Sierra 10.12.3.
Yeah, I think I have El Capitan.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. I mean, I don't mind if I was on OS 9. It's just, I still, I'm kicking ass more than others, and that's because I haven't completely destroyed all my entire arsenal by upgrading my system. Let's see here. So, Ian O'Donnell says, have any of you studied much Japanese music theory? For instance, and he shared this YouTube, how to write traditional Japanese style music, the Akibono scale. Mm-hmm. I wonder, I kind of like brought this question to us because I wondered, Dallas, if you had any experience with any of that.
Yeah, so there's another good YouTube video. They just released a second video in that Japanese scale series. I haven't watched it yet, but I enjoyed the first one. Japanese theory is based off of half scales, so we think of the octave as the divider, and they think of it as smaller than that. So they've got different half scales, and you can combine. I think they're basically like 4-note half scales, and you combine two to make a larger scale. So I assume the Akiboni scale is a combination of maybe the Aki half scale and the Bono half scale, but there's probably better words for that. I'm sure it's probably a nickname.
Oh, I see.
The other,
and he talks about the Yo scale. So.
Yes, there are a lot of good scales like that. I just like the concept of half scales because it's similar to early choral music in Western music as well. It's based off of the vocal range. Where you would have like hypomixolydian and mixolydian, and that would be based on whether you're going above the tone or going down. Mm-hmm. And it helps you set your melodies so that they have some focal point and some structure, because otherwise, your melodies can go across a wide range, or they can kind of meander, and you're not really aware of it. I think it's good to study.
A question of clarification on that. So you said that they generally divide their scales in two, or you're saying they have a 6-note scale or a 5-note scale, or does that span an octave sometimes with large leaps, or is it usually very tight?
Well, it's up to, I think it's the interval of a fourth. So, for example, you can divide that with 3 notes, and then the overlapping note is doubled in both half scales, so you end up with about 5 notes. So you could have, for example, if we're doing root in C up to F, and then you can have another note in between that. So that could be a D flat, a D, an E flat, or an E. You know, stuff like that. And then above that, you could have another scale, so it could be G, A flat, and then C. So you could have, G, A flat, C, and then C, D flat, F, and then you get a nice little scale, which I forget. But if you hear it, it's pretty traditional. The only thing I can think of right now is Gex 64 when you're in the food district, but it's a famous sound anyway. So yeah, they have like half scales that are basically like a fourth apart, and then you combine them, like piecemeal. And actually, when you're studying major scales for the first time, if you're trying to memorize them, that's a good way to do it, because a major scale is actually 2 major half scales combined together. So C, D, E, F, and then transpose that up a fifth, that's G, A, B, C, and that's the major scale. And then you start with G, A, B, C, transpose that up a fifth, D, E, F sharp, G, right? So you learn all 12 of those half scales, and then you just piece 2 of them together, and you have all your major scales, right? You're just swapping.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
I wonder how that could apply to what is it that you were telling me before? Stratification.
Yeah, it's something Alan Belkin talks about too.
You could extend those.
The super hyper mega meta-Lydians.
Yes.
Ultra mega meta-Lydian scale or whatever that Jacob Collier does.
Yes.
Just Lydian on Lydian. That's actually where he takes...
I think I've seen that guitar, by the way. It's got like 42 strings.
Yeah. What Jacob Collier does is he takes actually the 4-note scale, which is the Lydian, so instead of C, D, E, F, he does C, D, E, F sharp. And then he stacks just every one, transposing up a fifth. So C, D, E, F sharp, and then G, A, B, C sharp, and then D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and keeps going, and then you get a scale that's getting higher, and brighter.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it cycles through this, the other direction.
Oh, yeah, I can hear that. That sounds really nice.
Yeah, so half scales are really cool way, because they can bridge different harmonic sections.
Wow. What was that interesting piece you were listening to the other day that was playing with the microtonality?
Oh, geez, what was he called?
And what was the concept behind that?
Oh, this guy, I forget his name. If somebody knows, it starts with, it's like Sven or Sven.
Oh, Svesh.
Svesh?
Right,
yeah.
Right, Svesh.
I just barely found him. He uses different microtonal scales and just composes like this trap jungle type music to it. Very experimental. I love the concept. Is like, for example, he was using Wendy Carlos's alpha tuning, which is stacking perfect fifths. So the octave, there are no true octaves. It's basically like half scales. It's fifths,
wow,
all the way up, and then you find what tunings you like. What's dissonant, what's not. It's really interesting. You get
very pleasing to the ear.
Yeah, some of those like. It's weird.
It's
some
almost
of those
like
out of
listening
tune
to
notes.
music in nature or something. It was just very, very pleasing. It felt very biological and organic.
I was thinking about it. I wonder, you hear a song and it fits into your memory, right? And then maybe you're singing that song 15 years later. Is your mind going to remember it in perfect tuning, or is your mind going to assign some alternate tuning system to it by the nature of it being a memory? So then, when you hear this, these different tonal systems, is that is that closer to what you remember music as sounding like?
That's interesting. That's really interesting, because our mind does tend to almost rewrite or embellish. Especially over that span of time where it's 15 years, and it's like, I remember how this goes, but I remember it sounding quite I like this, or being in this key, or that's very interesting.
Cool. So, Stephen, you had something we wanted to talk about, huh?
Oh, yeah. Well, the other day we were kind of working on this concept of music editing and how important that is to add the final touches to maybe what you're working on. And it's just such a useful tool you were talking about. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit and how it can be used to, add that intensity or whatever you're going for,
Definitely. Well, one of the interesting things about when you have your music finished and then you've got all of your recorded tracks now over in, for example, Pro Tools, you switch over to kind of like a different mindset, because at that point you can cut out things and move things and copy paste things and rearrange things in a way that's very painless. And so it doesn't hurt anybody's feelings, including your own. So it's a very interesting detached way to reapproach your own music, and you can end up making some changes, and you're just wow, they're just completely maybe not intuitive, but are extremely creative and come out really well. Including like, how would this piece of music maybe sound in this other scene, which is not how you intended it, and then you put it over there, and it's like just about perfect, but this harp gliss happens at the wrong time or whatever, so you can just mute that harp gliss out, so you can kind of reform and readapt some of your music differently and experiment with big changes that can have big results in a very painless way that doesn't take very much time at all, as opposed to rewriting with notation, having to redo everything in the harmony, and the instrumentation and the orchestration.
Sure, the key switches are all right.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the benefits of music editing, is kind of like detaches you from that whole composing end of things and allows you to think at another new creative level with how is this music working with the visual,
In fact, one time you had me like just take some songs or whatever and see what they look like on top of the picture. See maybe they'll work, maybe they won't, but you're just kind of getting experience doing that, and that can accelerate your
completely. Like you could just dump in another track from pre-existing music, library music. This is what editors of the film, film editors do, is they bring in pre-existing music from other scores, from other movies that have similar themes, not themes musically, story themes, because usually that music kind of actually resonates with the same theme, and so they drop it in, and then of course the dreaded temp love starts happening with the filmmakers and everything. But what you should really be getting out of that temp music that's in there that everybody's loving is sort of the communication that music's providing. That's what they're really in love with. If you can provide that and actually maybe even fit it better than the temp music was fitting underneath their scene, then you've won the game, over the temp music battle.
Yeah, I think temp music is good because it's a way for directors to express themselves in an area that they don't really know so much about. But yeah, that dreaded temp love, I think, comes in when they start forming bonds with parts of the music that weren't initially what they wanted the music there for. If they liked music with this great horn solo and some action drums, maybe that's just what they like. But then the temp love comes in, they start liking the strings, which are wrong. They start liking the woodwinds, which are wrong, but simply because it's been there the whole time. That's when you start getting problems.
This summer I'm teaching a seminar, as everyone knows, called Total Scoring Mastery, and we have an entire hour-long segment on how to strategically work out that kind of situation where you have to battle against temp love. And I've developed several techniques that you can use that get the filmmaker eventually over that temp love and into what matters most, which is the original score you're providing.
Right.
And you could save a lot of time. I mean, if you're doing the wrong thing, like with that, you could just slap something on the film, and see if it works. You're not trying to think of something from scratch, which might take 3 or 4 hours. Who knows? So,
I highly recommend composers try it.
Yeah, I think
just try it. Just take your tracks,
try that.
Put them in the movie. After you're done, the tracks that you would have delivered to the stage, or the track outputs, or the recordings, whatever you have, the entire thing that's going to get score mixed, put it in Pro Tools, or whatever it is that you're proficient as an audio editor in, put it against the picture, and mute half the tracks, just as an experiment. Just mute half the tracks. Just cut it in half. And watch the thing. And go, what? That's very interesting. And then maybe on the next pass, solo one track. Just solo one track. Oh, wow. This is almost works better in this intimate way. It's communicating with just this one instrument. That's pretty interesting. And then you add back maybe, another track. And suddenly you realize that, you probably overscored the damn thing. And you need to go back down to the foundation and build it back up and start to make some decisions about what was just for your ego and what's actually making the movie really, really great. You're gonna be a better composer. Your music's gonna come out working with the movie better. Audiences are gonna respond to the movie better. That's gonna increase yourself and your success as well as the filmmaker's success, and that's gonna lead to you getting bigger and better work from them and as well as for yourself and more fans.
Yeah, and I was shocked the other day how you might have taken out I don't know how many instruments it was, and it was wow, this sounds better with all this extra stuff taken out. I was wow, how did you?
Right.
It was kind of cool. You don't realize it, but yeah, and
you kind of want to train yourself to be impartial in that way. And that's the best way to do it. Just learn how to rip your music apart and turn it backwards and upside down and throw it out in the garbage, a little trash can, and drag something else there and have that ability. It's so powerful and it's so helpful for you creatively and for your career.
Yeah, I think we should get over the assumption that just because we're composers that we know everything about music, including music editing. Yeah. So learning how to do it means you can work with a music editor because you understand their craft and their process better. But yeah, I definitely agree that editing is really nice because when you're composing, your music is like a gymnast and you're the coach who's trying to root for them and get them going on. But then when you turn around as a music editor looking at these finished WAV files, you're the judge and you're scrutinizing and you want to see what it actually is. You're not necessarily hoping for it to get farther than it deserves.
And and it gets you thinking about the narrative.
Yeah.
So it gets you stop and think about the music and think about the damn movie, because that's actually more important than your music, if you believe it or not, This career isn't about making albums.
Right.
It's about changing the world, and getting audiences to be moved and put through trials and tribulations and journeys that they can really feel and connect with. It's not about making albums.
It's funny, Steve, we were actually just talking about that yesterday when we were going over the editing for one of the projects, and from coming from my background where it's editing pretty much for any kind of just music or album world, you were just strictly doing, this came in a second early, there's a loud pop here, this is out of phase. That's your editing. You're not, you're not going in there going, let me just mute this bass and let me carry the guitar over here. The band is going to go, what are you doing? That's not the song, It's a completely different realm and world. But in the same regard, you're still, if you're learning both aspects of it, you can still use both aspects for each. I kind of feel like in certain ways, showing a band, hey, I tried this. You guys, we actually like that more. We like that chorus a little bit, maybe further back or that. So it's one of those things where it's very different, but at the same time, you can still use each maybe certain skills from each to kind of
And it's good to know too, if you know how to write a song and how to write a score, where exactly the threshold between them is. So, if you say, okay, I'm going to start breaking up the rhythms and the beat here, that you're crossing a line from song into score.
Right.
And the implications of that. You're not just going in blind and, kind of listening back and going by feel, but contextually what the audience is going to understand as well.
Yes. Can I still understand those basic foundations to the actual song itself? Yes.
Now, Kyle, Eve asks you specifically,
nice.
Kyle, when you're mixing, do you have a limiter on the master, as this would certainly change the decisions you make, or this is a bad habit and we should avoid it?
No, I don't have a limiter on the master. No, I kind of feel like in any case, you don't really want to affect your master channel too much with any kind of thing. Like no real. If you're working on a mix that absolutely you receive your tracks from, and there's no way of going back, and you need, say, a compressor on your master, they're maybe not really be
from a surgeon standpoint.
From a surgeon standpoint, exactly. But from a creative standpoint, if you can avoid it, absolutely avoid it at all costs.
Yeah. Obviously now over on the dubbing stage, the dubbing mixers for the movie, they have to have brick wall limiters, so that they don't cause a problem on optical print tracks, which God knows, maybe they still print in Thailand or something. You got to be safe for optical. You got to pass all PQ for Atmos and THX and Dolby and all these different systems. And so they have a real strict standards to adhere to on the dubbing stage. But man, you do not want to give someone who's going to limit the content something that's already limited. You want to give them the freedom of the headroom. And so my own answer to that also is to concur. Don't put anything on your masters. Nothing. Just let them do all that sweetening there at the dubbing stage.
Exactly.
They know what curves to use and what curves there should be, and and trust me, you'll never get it right.
Yes. No,
Even if you're perfect, even if you're a great engineer, you just leave it alone. They have, every dubbing stage and engineer has what they're going to do to the mix, and you can just kind of leave that alone.
I strictly use it as a reference. That's all I pretty much use your master fader for. It's just a reference to see how is the summation of this mix. Am I clipping? Am I hitting that threshold? Am I just clipping just enough to where it's going to be fine for the mastering, so they have plenty of headroom? I think that's something that people need to kind of take into effect, especially composers when they're working on a film score. Is, okay, when I turn this in, are they going to have to go back and adjust these volumes because I left them zero headroom for the mastering stage? I think it's something that's very important to kind of keep in mind. So.
Yeah, that's kind of tricky to create headroom where initially there wasn't any.
Exactly.
You're starting with no dynamic difference.
Exactly.
Yeah, no one's really created a good expander. That's called an expander, what you would use there if you needed more dynamic range. But they're often very reactive, and you can hear the little flip.
You can hear that.
You can hear the attacks and the releases, and it's not an easy game to play to try and get an expander to.
You don't want to go in yourself and surgically change each transient either. Just fix it when you're writing it. Fix it when you're mixing it.
Yes, exactly.
Fix it as early as you get it.
Yes, that's a really good piece of advice. Yeah, as early as you get it, fix it. You see the problem there, just tackle it.
At the microphone,
Yes, absolutely.
Let's see here. So, thanks, Eve, for that question.
Thank you.
Thanks,
He's
Eve.
coming in from Twitch. I guess that's his main video watching platform.
Nice.
I see what Eve does in his spare time. Now, Tomas Iglesias asks, what does Cubase Pro have that Pro Tools doesn't? For those scoring with Cubase, have you tried Pro Tools? What didn't you use it? I suppose that's a translation.
Oh, okay.
There. Thanks. And, there's quite a bit that Pro Tools has, and there's quite a bit that Cubase has. One of the things that Pro Tools has more than even Cubase Pro and Nuendo is way more buses, way more internal buses, and maximum number of tracks, audio tracks, corresponding to buses. So with just the basic edition of Pro Tools, you can have 256. With the Ultimate, or what used to be called the HD version, you now can do 768, and that's without any hardware at all. Once you start adding hardware, you can bring that up to thousands and thousands of audio tracks and buses. And buses, that's very important, because if you don't have the buses, then you basically don't have the tracks. So that's one way it's different. Probably Cubase has more in the MIDI department. Well, let's just say it's much more advanced in the MIDI department. Pro Tools does have a lot of MIDI functions, but Cubase just probably has a better graphical interface on how to display all that. So, I think, some of the guys mentioned the same thing. More MIDI flexibility than Pro Tools. Cubase has more MIDI options, better MIDI workflow and response. I don't know if the newest version has changed it, but in the past it was a nightmare for me and more users. I suppose he's talking about Pro Tools there. Leo Brennauer says, 1 year back I had decided for either one. I wasn't sure. A lot of people told me to go for Cubase when working with MIDI, so that's what I did, and I'll never regret it. And hey, to be honest, I like the GUI way more, and he shared some screenshots of the GUI, the GUI differences between Pro Tools and Cubase.
Yeah, Pro Tools is just ugly. I've got to say it. I hate
It's
looking at
ugly.
it.
It
Yeah.
is.
I really hate looking at it.
Yeah, it's still kind of 80s looking, but it is phenomenal. It is just so good as far as audio editing. I really don't know how you can
audio really
have a MIDI workflow in it. Also, for scoring, you can't really score in Pro Tools unless you have a separate Pro Tools session for every cue, because some cues might overlap. And then you get into like muting tracks and not muting others, and I suppose you could solve that with mute automations, but not really, not if they overlap, because how's it going to know which cue you're like to be listening to now, the pre-roll that's coming in from this other cue that overlap the ending of the other one, so you have to manually always be switching back and forth. So the only real answer is separate sessions for cues. And that's a bit of a pain in the butt. Cubase also has that problem, and so does Logic. But Digital Performer solves that by their chunks methodology, which allows you to have multiple cues up at one time. I think probably it took a while for you to warm up to that, Dallas, but now you probably see the kind of helpfulness of that.
Yeah, it's been great. I actually was worried about, like a corrupted file or something ruining my entire project, but I haven't had that issue, and it's really nice to jump back and forth between different projects. Different cues. Can you imagine if you're working on Logic and you didn't have VEP or something, and you needed to copy and paste the MIDI from one session to another? You can do the import and stuff, but it's a mess. It's with DP, you just open up the other chunk, grab what you want, copy it, and then jump back and paste it.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Easy peasy.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
Now, Kyle, I think you had something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys kind of a broad question here, but say when you're approaching a score, you don't really have a lot of notes or say direction from whoever you're working for, your client kind of gave you more of a creative kind of freedom there. How would you say kind of approach, say, do I want to have a big grandiose scale or do I want to have a very minimalist scale? Kind of what factors do you use to kind of anticipate what approach is going to be best? Say, okay, this is just going to be a character-driven drama where it's just a guy out in the woods for a couple years and we just follow his journey, and in that regard, it's like, is it too simple to think, you're just going to keep it very minimalist and small? Is that maybe something that everyone would kind of jump to as to where it's like, well, you can do that, but you can still make a very big, large score for this one person and make it feel like not only is it intimate, but it makes his journey seem like it's this much larger, So I just want to see what your take on that is. So
sure. This is a topic that is another hour discussion.
It is.
It's Summer's scoring seminar. The intersection is literally called approach.
Oh, okay.
And it's impossible really to compact it down because there's so many wonderful and interesting variables to think about in order to come to finally the ultimate best decision. But I think some of the most important ones are demographics. What's the demographic target of this? Where is it going to be played? Who's it appealing to?
Okay.
And how do you make that maximally appealing? And do those people like intimate, small, little creative scores, or do they like is it a period piece and you want to go that way?
Right.
Are they interested in more like a Stanley Kubrick Clockwork Orange kind of approach? It could go run the gamut. Or is it do they expect a big blockbuster score here? Is that what they're expecting? You want to make the audience. You want to make the audience happy, because if the audience is happy, that makes the filmmakers happy.
Right.
And if the filmmakers are happy, because the audience is happy, you're going to keep working with those filmmakers, and you're going to get recommended, and the movie's going to go places. It's going to have more legs. So yeah, I think you have to take all that into consideration. I don't know how to boil it down, but
no, that was a good broad answer actually. Because I was just kind of looking for more, just kind of the more broader kind of thing. Because I think demographic is one of the most important things there. Say if you are doing a piece where someone's in kind of just like the woods for a while, maybe referencing, maybe watching a few maybe films that kind of center around that. Maybe even going as far to watch find a YouTube channel where it's a very kind of well-respected, well-received YouTube channel. It's all about outdoors, outdoor living and such like that. See kind of what that approach is. See what people respond to. I think referencing and kind of using those sort of outside influences, I think I would kind of is in my thought.
I think it's funny because when you watch YouTube videos, a lot of times the music choices are very rough, and harsh, and a lot of times derivative and on the nose. But
yes,
sometimes it can give you a good idea of what people expect in scoring, even if there's no nuance.
Right.
Right. It's like a fine artist looking at cartoons kind of thing. But the other thing, I was going to add is that, when you watch a final film, you see, like, oh, here's the premise and here's the score, and it seems like you can draw a straight line between the two. But often in the case when you're at the beginning, you don't know how you're going to get to that number. And it's, there's a ton of different decisions that you make and context that you consider. So what may seem like a really simple connection at the end of it after watching everything is actually a very convoluted and complicated journey to reach that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so many factors, the characters,
right,
their journeys. So what does that sound like? The overall kind of message of the whole thing. So how important is that to convey, and what does that sound like, and the world they're in, the story world, what does that sound like, a lot of people think, film scoring is so easy. All you got to do is do what everybody else has been doing.
Right.
But that's not really a good formula to go by. You need to think it through. You need to figure out truly, what is the best approach we can go here, and go for it. Make good decisions, top to bottom, and that'll give you probably the answer.
Okay. Yeah, very good.
So Chris Hayes asks, I am running CPU heavy programs like East West Platinum. My current computer's not cutting it. What is the perfect dream? This is 2019 and his current computer is not cutting it. You know what I mean? It's like, is that a sign the computers
it's not
are
the
bad?
computer.
Thank you. What is the perfect... So then he goes down the road of asking, what is the perfect dream machine of specs for Windows? AMD Threadripper, all this. And everyone's replying, maybe you could go with it, an i9 processor and SSDs and all this stuff. But I asked him, is that using the Play engine? And he says, yeah, it is. And then somebody immediately jumps in and says, Play is a RAM hog. It's not just a RAM hog. It's a CPU hog. It's a RAM hog. It's a real drag on your computer. So if you want to go east-west, you might need to run several computers. They're cheap for students. They've got the student rate. You can have the whole cloud thing for even the non-student rate for a pretty good price on a monthly subscription for like 6 of their libraries. Yeah. And so it's real tempting, but yeah, it's a real problem for your computer. And so the problem here is not your computer, man. It's east-west, and I don't know what to tell east-west other than go back to the drawing board, man.
Yeah. East-West is nice for beginners because it's cheap, and you can load your template up in the morning, and then you can go to college, and then when you come back from school, it'll be loaded in the afternoon, and then you can start working. Just a little joke, but yeah, actually, I do like the idea of having a separate computer just for East-West and always running, so you never... Because loading times are terrible for Play. It's like 4 times as slow at least to get everything loaded. Maybe even up... It's like 15 minutes to get a full... session loaded if you're relying on all the east-west stuff, and that's just unacceptable, especially if you're not using Vion Ensemble Pro and you have to load every single Logic session file before you write the next cue. That adds up very quickly.
Oh yeah,
hours and hours and hours of just sitting and waiting.
Yeah, now you can't even load Play in VEP. Is that correct, or is that not correct?
That's
no, you can probably.
I assume
can you? Yeah, so that might be one way to solve that. You can load it up the previous night or something.
Yeah, when I used to, I didn't have VEP, so I did have to wait for Logic to load, and it was like 8 or 9 minutes at least.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt.
Yep.
So, Dallas, you had something interesting you wanted to tell me.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you guys, and I guess ask the audience as well if you guys want to comment below. How did you just first get interested in film music, in film scoring, in films in general? What brought you in?
All right. Well, you don't mind me starting on that one.
Go for it.
So I used to, my dad, who was musical, died when I was 5, and I didn't really know him because he was on the road all the time. So sort of, I guess, genetically, I had passion for music boiling inside me because I was unaware that he was a musician, and I wasn't really exposed to music. And yet we had a piano in the house, and after he died, I was always sleeping under the piano and just trying to play piano, and I was interested, and so therefore I got early piano lessons. And that just kept going for several years, and then I showed an interest in music theory because I asked a lot of why questions. Why would Mozart go up and not down there, and just flat out concert pianists don't sort of typically ask those kinds of questions. So I had a teacher who was lucky. I was lucky enough to have a good private teacher to give me music theory. So then around age 9, around 8 or 7, I got into movies and was watching just tons of movies, but older movies, classics. And when I was 9, I was watching Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps, and this car was driving around this cliff in this one shot. And the shot stayed solid. It was like a distant shot. You see the cliff, and it was at night, and this car's going around the cliff. And the car slips off the cliff and falls like off screen while the shot remains focused on the cliff onto the ocean below, supposedly. You couldn't see it though. So it falls off screen, and then somewhere off screen was a sort of bum bum, this music. And I never realized, and it makes me realize now that, to the laymen don't really realize that there's score in movies, that there's this music manipulating their emotions,
That's true.
I certainly never realized at that point that there was music in movies. It's just not what I watched movies for. I just never noticed it, or that it could actually be useful and practical and serve a purpose. And I was very interested in psychology at this time as well. So I saw that music was conveying something in the story, that that people had died at the bottom of the cliff, and that was a psychological communication. And I thought, oh man, this is it. Wow, psychology, movies, music, I get to combine them all. I'm dedicating my entire life to this. So at age 9, that's when I knew it. And at age 12, I started going to local college to study orchestration and 20th century harmony. And at 15, I went to CSULB. And then by 17, I was at UCLA in the film scoring program, where I was now in Los Angeles. I was able to start working for Basil Polidoris, Jerry Goldsmith, David Newman, Danny Elfman, Jeff Rona, John Frizzell, many people on mini movies, and eventually orchestrating for the London Symphony. And so that's my sort of growth chart on the trajectory chart for getting into film scoring, and how it was, what that was, that initial first moment that made me interested in this. So in a way, I'm still like a 9-year-old, just totally loving what I'm doing here.
Cool. What about you?
I would say, for me, growing up, we were a very musical household in the fact that we were always playing something. And at a very young age, I was very. My mom has a story where I was a baby in a crib, and I was very loud. And I cried all the time. And that's the joke. My parents were like, yeah, we couldn't go anywhere for 2.5 years because you just would not stop. We didn't know what was wrong with you. And my mom says,
maybe that's why you're so thin.
I think it's why I'm so, it's very lanky. But my mom has a story where I was coming on my first birthday, so it was Christmas, so she was wrapping gifts. I'm born December 28th, anyone else, send me gifts. And so she's wrapping for Christmas, and I was crying in my crib, and she was, I checked on him about 20 times today, I don't know what's going on. So she was like, you know what? She put some music on to kind of drown me out in a way. Thanks, Mom. And and she goes, I didn't really realize it, and I'm wrapping gifts, and then you just stopped. And I kind of was like, oh, he's not crying. So I got worried, so I went to go see you. And you were just kind of up in your crib holding the bar, and you were just bouncing, So I think it was just very early on, and I've always had that reaction to music. And even when I was a kid, I remember some of my favorite parts of a film were the end credits, because I loved hearing the end titles. I loved hearing the song. If it was a reprise from the movie, if it was something new. And that was my favorite, I used to get mad if they would try to let my dad. I always turn the movie off after the credits. Like, no, play it. I want to hear this.
Right, that's the best part.
That's the best part. And I think just growing up with that, and kind of always being influenced by that, and getting more into just music itself as opposed to seeing music in film. And for me, I've kind of the older I got, I started getting more into instrumental music without vocals, and to say I'm not a fan of that music, but seeing how a lot of instrumental groups I was listening to were adopting sort of these principles and theories from more composition, from actual film scoring. They were writing more in movements as opposed to verse chorus, and I thought that was extremely very influential to me. And even now, I think that's what really brought me into the scope, especially with this here. I mean, with everything that you guys have built, and what really kind of caught me was like, I've always wanted to learn how to, even my own music, have a better understanding of implementing these sort of cinematic scores into just actual music itself. A lot of musicians, in case they come from more of my sort of kind of rock or DIY background, sort of turn their nose up to film score. Oh, that's written for picture. It's not, it's not just for the music for itself. But I disagree on that in a lot of regards, to where it's obviously you're serving the film, like you just said. That's the whole point. Your score doesn't really matter in that regard. But in the same token, you still want to make sure you're conveying those subconscious sort of feelings, those emotions. And I thought that's what just really grasped me, and sort of implementing those back into, say, more of a album type music, or just music, just for music. I think there's so many strengths in that, and just kind of creating that. I mean, when I hear certain cues in a movie, I mean, it makes the hair on my neck, stand up, and I want that same experience when I'm listening to a song. I want, I think I kind of thrive on that now, and I seek that out. And I always kind of come to that crossroads where I think people are always so divided on certain subjects.
And let me ask you, can the hairs on the back of your neck stand up only with classical music?
No,
it can happen with anything, right?
Absolutely.
Which is partially shows that you can move somebody to such emotional levels regardless of the style.
Yes. Which
really opens things up as a film composer, because now you could approach a movie score, heavy metal or techno or anything new that you're doing, the re-stratification of microtones, whatever it is, so long as what you're actually, aiming towards is moving the audience emotionally to whatever dramatic levels,
Yes, exactly. I think it's, the last kind of thing I just wanted to say, I think we're always so divided when it comes to certain aspects where you're this, I'm that, and I never understood. I always was like, well, why don't we just meet in the middle, and kind of come to terms with certain things, and understand that when you combine certain processes or certain ideals, you're gonna start bridging paths. You're gonna start creating these things that are only gonna, I think, in my opinion, really gonna help you. And if they don't work, you're gonna if you're versed at what you're doing, if you're talented, if you understand what you're doing, you're gonna figure it out very quickly. So I mean, that's kind of what drew me into it. I guess just that quality of how powerful cinematic music can really be, even on the subconscious level. So.
And I like how it kind of distills the ideas into an emotional experience. It's like this is the idea, and you can express it right there, then and there, and you're not adding all this extra baggage and fluff, which a lot of people tend to do, a lot of musicians. So you can get right to that thing, and that's kind of how I got into it as well. I mean, I'm not gonna bore you guys with the details, but it was kind of like
it's time to hear your story.
No, I kind of eliminated all the other things that I like. Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? No, I don't want to do that. So it was like I was maybe the right word is I was looking for some excitement in something day to day. I wanted some, something that was exciting and gave me that feel that I hadn't been getting anywhere else. So, so
that's when you're born to do it. Mm-hmm. When it moves you.
Yes.
Personally, from the inside, passionately. So that must be it for you. I mean, do you ever look back at sometimes I go back and I realize there were early signs. Do you ever look back and think, maybe when I was, because for instance, when I was two and a half years old, I was at my dad's apartment in New York City, up in some skyscraper, and he had an upright piano right by the window, and I was over there. I was hitting the low keys, and it's like, King Kong is coming, King Kong is coming, and I never thought about that. But like, I think around 30, I realized, wait a minute, hang on a second. That was me translating musical instruments to dramatic storytelling points.
Yes.
So I was a born film composer.
Yes.
Yeah, that could
Do you
be.
think there was some-
I was always doing things like that. I would write things on this, like, even though I couldn't really notate music, it was interesting because I had this program called Cakewalk Studio, and I would just use the mouse and kind of like just click everywhere on the page, and I wouldn't even know what I was doing. Like, I would try like the notation was all off and it was like totally wrong, but it sounded cool. I was like looking for cool sounds, and I used like the instruments, like synthesizers, and it was like, whoa, cool, I made a little piece. I would do that all the time. Like,
Oh,
it was,
yeah.
like, yeah. So it was just like, nothing could compare. So that's when I knew.
Now, the other week,
Cool.
you and
Yeah.
I went and we saw that movie Us.
Oh yeah.
Have either of you got to
haven't
see
seen it,
that?
no, unfortunately.
No? Oh, okay. And I wanted to just talk about that for a minute
Oh, cool, yeah.
to end the show. First of all, what did you think of the movie?
Yeah. Wow. There's so much to say about it. Very, very.
Without giving away spoilers,
Just.
which there are two.
What's
there are two spoilers that could easily.
Yeah.
give
Don't want. That's the. Whoa. Summarize it in one word. I mean, it was.
How about, is it memorable?
Oh
Forgettable?
yeah, I would say definitely memorable.
Memorable.
Yeah.
Did it were you able to like relate to it at all, or like did it move you internally at all?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking from maybe like a sci-fi
Yeah.
level. It was like, whoa, this is kind of
So
cool.
kinda like
It's
intellectually.
It's like intellectually. It was like a new concept. It was like something new.
Yeah.
That kind of on that level, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
well, I haven't seen this before.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe-
Yeah, my impression was that it took this family along a journey of being oblivious to dangers in the world, and presented those dangers and put them through trials and tribulations to see if they could survive. And that's something we can all relate to. So it definitely brought something archetypal to the audiences, and as a result, it was a historic horror film opening, and it grossed more than any other horror movie. So I think that probably played into it. However, I think once you were in the theater and you were satisfied with that, 75% of the movie, there's a big finale sequence, which I felt wasn't even necessary. I think they could have kept going with that story arc I just mentioned. And then there was a big twist, as everyone probably has heard, without giving that away. I also felt that wasn't necessary, but it was actually so cool that even though it wasn't necessary, it had such wow factor and intellectually like pow that it kind of made up for it in that sense. So you lost like narrative purpose by just going but it was like whoa. So that actually worked really well. I think that the score started off really creative and interesting. It had this staccato choir piece, going sure, yeah, sure. Over, if you've seen the trailer, you've seen like these, rabbits are commonly, shown in the movie, and there was like this sequence like that, and with these rabbit cages and stuff, and that kind of set up like, wow, this is going to be quite different. But I was a little bit disappointed in the score, in that basically after that point it was pretty straightforward and what you would expect from
Kind of like brooding tones.
from screechy dissonances and riser builds, and from strings. You're kind of like classic horror screechy stuff.
Is it interesting that like the trailer music was what was innovative and the film music sounded like generic trailer music?
Well, that's cool that you mentioned that. I was going to point out that the music that's in the trailer is the music that's in the film, both the songs that were used and the melodies and stuff. However, they never play as full and in their entirety as a motif or a theme as they did in the trailer, which was kind of strange. So in other words, if you want to be fully satisfied with the score, you kind of got to go watch the trailer because everything in the film got turned into just like, long tone or sequences. There wasn't really any good bold thematic statements anywhere. So it was a little disappointing in that it wasn't as creative as it looked like it was about to become, and probably that's why I went to go see it. Was I felt the music in the trailer was so creative and it was so dynamic, and I was really happy to see that they were using the same music in the movie, but unfortunately disappointed that it really didn't deliver creatively, and it turned out to be kind of like just used in a very pat way. What did you think, Steve?
Oh, yeah, I would say so too. Yeah, the screeches and the whatever but didn't they use a song?
Just a couple songs.
They had a song, but then they used the melody of the song or something like that. From what I remember, it's kind of interesting. And then they put it on
in the trailer.
In the trailer, yeah. They brought that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put it. Yeah.
It's a nice little melody, I guess, like a bird
motif.
chirp.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Oh, I know that the also I heard, and I've been avoiding all articles about the movie, even though I've seen it, because there's even a spoiler. Even if you've seen the movie, if you haven't seen his first film, Get Out, there's a link, an important link. And I don't know what it is, and I don't want to know.
Gotta figure it out.
I'm gonna have to watch Get Out. Apparently, and there was a report yesterday where Jordan Peele revealed why he had to do that twist that I mentioned.
Okay.
And that's I didn't read anymore, but I know it probably had to do with Get Out, and I don't even want to know why. Please don't tell me why.
Maybe you have to go back to like Key and Peele episodes.
Just start picking things apart.
Academy Award winning Jordan Peele. Isn't that insane?
Oh, that'd be funny.
Incredible. Well, I wanted to mention that next week and every week, Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. PST, we're going into virtual reality, as we always do, Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. And we hang out and flip burgers and talk about what we're working on. It's just a little 30-minute jump-in session. And so if you've got like some kind of a 3D headset, you can use that. Or if you have Android phone, you can even go in 2D. You don't have to do it in 3D. Just download AltSpace VR. And then you'll get the information from me or any of my groups, or simply just ask. And we'll get you the link, and you can come join us in virtual reality to hang out. Has it been fun, Steve?
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we've had a bunch of composers coming over, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a interesting experience.
It's very different. And it's great to be able to meet with everybody from around the world like that in a nice, fun hangout place regularly every week without having to buy a plane ticket every single time or having to waste car gas or whatever it is. So that's pretty cool. And again, as I mentioned before, this summer we'll be having the seminar, Total Scoring Mastery. We'll have more details. I'll be able to speak about that probably in a couple days. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
It was great having you. And we'll see you.